Hey guys, welcome back to another repaint video here at the compound. Now, one of my favorite things is having matching hatchlings or juveniles to pair alongside their adult counterparts. And since the Hammond Collection Ankylosaurus has recently become my new favorite figure from Mattel, I figured now would be a great time to have some fun and give this Bumpy figure a repaint to match the adult version. Now, before I start slinging paint, I wanted to remove the shell so I can paint it and the rows of rubbery spikes separately. This was just as simple as giving the shell a little tug and breaking the glue and the pegs that hold it together. I'm also going to remove this stubby little tail and replace it with a slightly longer one from the Zuru Dino Strike blind bag Ankylosaurus figure. And once all of that's done, I can start to lay down a couple of thin coats of white primer just to give the paint something to grab onto. So as for the color of the body, I don't really have one perfect color that will match immediately right out of the bottle, so I had to play around with a few different paints, and after a lot of trial and error, I eventually landed on the right recipe that ended up being a decent match. The paints I ended up using were United States Air Force Brown with a couple of drops of Dead Flesh and about 5 drops of Sepia Shade Wash. Not sure how these three colors worked so well together, but they did, and it ended up being a very close match to the adult Ankylosaurus. As for the shell, it's sort of the same deal as the body color. I didn't have just one color that matched perfectly, so I had to play around with some colors until I landed on a combo that worked. The colors I ended up going with for the shell were a mix of neutral gray mixed with some dark brown and a few drops of Beastie Brown. I've got this mixed down in a cup, and then I'll transfer a few drops from that cup into my airbrush and lay down a couple of thin coats. Now, before I go and paint in all of the dark scales on the rest of the body, I want to first lay down the red fade around the eyes. For that, I mixed a couple of drops of Vallejo red ink with about 1 drop of transparent burnt umber just to darken that red up just a hair and add a bit of warmth and like an orange tint to it almost. And then I'll just lightly lay down that red fade over both sides of the head. Now that the red is done, I can jump in and start to paint the dark gray scales along the head and the sides of the face. This is pretty straightforward and is just essentially coloring at this point. You can choose to either paint the scales on the arms or the legs, or you can just leave them blank like the adults. I'm going to paint them just to add some more deco hits on this guy. I think just adds a little extra pop of color on his skin, but it's totally up to you how far you want to go with the paint apps. So with all the dark colors put down, now I'm going to go in with some Stonewall Gray and dry brush the end of the club, and then I'll go back over that again and do a final highlight color with Bone White. I'll take the same color that I used on the shell and I'll carefully paint in his little nails, and then I'll take some black and I'll block in his giant adorable eyes, and of course add a white light catch and then give them a gloss top coat just to bring them to life. Next up are the rubber spike inserts, and for those I just kind of kept it really simple and I just gave them a wash with this werewolf fur, which is essentially just a grayish brown color. And now the adult has this tan wash in between the cracks on his head and shell. So to sort of mimic that effect, I'll take some tan and wash it over the area, making sure that it gets down into all the little cracks, and then I'll just wipe off the excess raised areas, leaving that tan paint down into the cracks. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this guy. I'll put his shell back on and glue it down, and then I'm going to set him aside for a moment while I grab the adult, because while we have the paint out, we might as well paint in the claws while we're here, and for that I'm just using the same mix that I used on the baby. But now that we're finally done with all the paint apps, we can go ahead and seal everything up with some matte varnish to protect that paint, and this little guy is ready to rock and roll. So as always, I appreciate you guys hanging out and watching. Hope you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful or inspiring in some way, shape, or form. If you give this a shot, or maybe you've done a different hatchling repaint of your own, remember to tag me over on Instagram at the Jurassic Park Compound, because I'd love to see your work and share it in my story. For more Jurassic related content, you know where to find it. Links will be in the description box below. You guys take care, and I'll see you around the compound.